Julian, welcome to Talk Satellite. Thank you for coming along today.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here, Kevin.
So can you provide a brief outline of your role as Head of Asia Pacific for GSMA and run through a few highlights from the recent year and a vision for what's happening going forward?
Sure. So my name is Julian Gorman. I'm the head of Asia Pacific at GSMA, which in GSMA, Asia Pacific is Afghanistan to the Pacific, not including China. As GSMA's Global Mobile Industry Association, we unite more than 1,000 mobile operators and businesses across the global ecosystem and related industries to advance innovation using mobile technology to unlock power of connectivity, help individuals, society, and nations thrive. And satellite and NTN ecosystem is becoming a growing part of our membership. It's always been there. Satellite's always been there and been an important part of the industry in Asia Pacific. But my Asia Pacific team really coordinates the efforts of GSMA, the priorities of our members across the region. We monitor policy and legislative developments in the region, identify priorities for the mobile industry, and develop and communicate consensus positions on these priorities. And importantly, across the region, we build communities to advance the deployment of mobile technology for meaningful impact on addressing those opportunities around digital transformation. Our operational model is a bit unique in Asia Pacific because it's such a diverse region. And we issue reports like our Digital Nations report, which includes an index to help nations calibrate their progress towards a digital nation. And we issue white papers, and we also convene the industry across a diverse number of events, including our own Digital Nation Summits, which are national one-day events, M360 ASEAN, which is a new event which will launch this year, which is really around bringing together ASEAN countries and the global stakeholders interested in the ASEAN region around harmonizing efforts across border data flows and innovation in the ASEAN region. And we also work with other partners in the region, including the India Mobile Congress, the Pacific Islands Telecom Association, to bring in the diverse communities that make up the APAC region. Of course, growing area of focus for us is satellite and NTN. Our GSMA NTN community unites mobile operators, satellite operators, vendors, and across the ecosystem, including policymakers, which are increasingly focused on how terrestrial and NTN integration is going to really help nations achieve that full inclusiveness potential of bringing everybody into the digital economy through a combination of terrestrial and NTN connectivity. If I was to highlight a few things in the last year for the region, few I'd highlight is actually we've just seen the passing of the last of the big countries. What I mean, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh and India, the big population countries of Asia Pacific, have all now just issued spectrum and on that 5G journey. But importantly, also countries like Vietnam have really globally innovated by providing rapid 5G rollout through their spectrum allocation process, actually a rebate, and where operators who grew their rollout faster than put forward in their license actually are entitled to a rebate on the capital deployment of the network. And that's seen some real, let's say, competition for innovation across the region. Just the scale and the innovation of places like Vietnam have really sort of now put Asia Pacific fully into that 5G era. And actually, we recognize Vietnam's progress this year through the GLOMO Award for Global Leadership, which was granted at Mobile World Congress Barcelona this year. But the final one I'd highlight there on the key points in the last year, just a couple of weeks ago in Tokyo, we held our first Digital Nation Summit Tokyo, where NTN was a key topic because Japan's a real leader in this space. But what we had is the pioneer operators, the region, and 6G alliances of Asia Pacific signed what we call the Tokyo Accord, which creates a coalition of the region's pioneers committed to solving the challenges of today, such as 5G monetization, innovation over 5G, to help build that bridge to a future sustainable and inclusive period of network innovation with 6G and beyond. And then that all sort of wraps up into the vision we have for the region, which is around really building sustainable digital nations where nations can solve the complex algorithm of technology, regulation, and innovation that allows everybody to participate in a safe and secure digital economy.
Very good. And the issue of those spectrum licenses is so important as we go forward. Markets in Asia can vary immensely. How can GSMA best support nations who are positioning themselves to take advantage of satellite mobile integration over the next 2 to 3 years?
It's a very true comment you got there, Kevin, about the very immensely. The connectivity landscape and the advancement of different digital nations really differs tremendously across the region. Not only policy and economic drivers, but the geographic makeup of Asia Pacific. It just means that NTN satellite integration is a key opportunity to help complete that journey to a region of digital nations over the next couple of years as the technology continues to evolve rapidly. You've got archipelagos and complex mountains and across Asia Pacific, countries of small populations spread across thousands of kilometers in the Pacific, which are all creating some of the most challenging terrains for terrestrial networks. As a result, there's always been a historical interest in aerial solutions, but also the participation or the use of satellite in even creating those terrestrial networks. As NTN technology has advanced rapidly in recent times, we are seeing that Asia Pacific is really at the leading edge of that. And you see that I think more than 46 telcos are active in the region with satellite and NTN partnerships as they see the complementary nature of NTN technology as it develops to the terrestrial networks to help achieve those inclusive digital nations. From a GSMA's point of view, we issue the NTN tracker, which reports that across Asia Pacific, we do have an enormous variation in the maturity of those satellite partnerships. You've got Indonesia, India, Australia, New Zealand, where you've already got operators have already launched satellite partnerships with connectivity, while other countries such as Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia are all planning or in testing phase. The GSMA, we're all about focusing on providing advice and best practice to help markets develop and digitally transform. And we've developed what we call Digital Nations Framework, as I mentioned before, a Digital Nations Report, which is an evidence-based tool to help governments identify gaps in digital readiness across 5 pillars. And infrastructure is one of those key pillars. And that's where NTN also, and the NTN integration plays a key part in the calibration of a country's inclusive deployment of connectivity infrastructure. And last year, we issued a white paper around non-terrestrial networks, around the opportunities and challenges, which was really a guide for people to be able to understand the path of the technology and the opportunities for nations and industry to look out, include NTN in their plans and the timing and the development of that. And of course, NTN is not only contributing to shape the trajectory of 5G, but it's also poised to become a foundational pillar in the evolution towards 6G, where we're looking to create a seamless global connectivity. And so that's really expected to be a defining feature of the next generation of network. I suppose a key area where that's beyond what I think you discussed with Alex Sinclair recently about GSMA's role around helping turn technical standardization into meaningful deployment is our role in the region is really helping regulators and industry understand that journey from technical standardization to deployment and inclusion and making the technology meaningful to users. And, we certainly in the region play a big role in engaging with regulators and operators to help the convergence that's required to drive regulatory modernization so that the two can coexist and complement each other.
GSMA Intelligence, I believe overall you're already tracking over 100 plus partnerships between mobile operators and satellite companies. The movement is rapid, but ultimately, what are the most exciting players in Asia Pacific region for telecom operators and satellite players?
Well, as I mentioned before, Asia Pacific, very complex geographies. And also, while mobile or terrestrial networks cover, more than 95% of populated areas, there's obviously a large part of the population who operate outside of these areas on a day-to-day basis. Might not be where they work, but, if you think of fishermen between the islands of Indonesia, at times of disaster, and the region has a lot of natural disasters to create problems. There's also rural coverage gaps. It's only in the small percentage, but, from a way that people operate in their daily lives, there is times when being able to achieve 100% land coverage or even some maritime coverage, we'll see incremental coverage making meaningful value to users. Of course, also across Asia Pacific, you have some of the largest populations in the world. When it comes to satellite opportunity to connect, it's a big addressable market. Just highlighting India as a focal point. Bharti Airtel has partnerships with Eutelsat, Hughes and Starlink. Reliance Jio has partnered with SES. Vodafone Idea has partnered with AST. India's advanced satellite communication rollout is already underway with licensing framework earlier in the year. I think that sets a big stage for the world to look at and observe. And you complement it with that. You see, Japan has always been at the leading edge of this NTN connectivity. In March, KDDI announced the world's first cross-border satellite-to-mobile roaming service with SpaceX, and all the operators in Japan have these partnerships with satellite connectivity. That's even when you think of Japan as a very advanced market, there's still a complex geography which satellite helps to bridge that, close that coverage gap, the remote areas. Even Japan's history around HAPS deployment is also a regional blueprint. And Japan's Ministry of Communications has already established a regulatory framework to support commercial deployment of high-altitude platforms. And I think that is also providing a leadership position, helping the rest of the region and the world be guided by that pioneering effort to making sure that direct-to-device mobile connectivity is a complementary and useful service for industry and society. Those leading positions from like Japan, India, and even New Zealand was also positioned as in the leading edge of this, provide a blueprint for bridging coverage gaps in rural and mountainous areas, and also the diverse circumstances of natural disasters and operational requirements that happen from time to time in disaster-prone areas. So it's a very active space in Asia Pacific. You're right, GSMA intelligence continues to track those and help share the knowledge that's happening across Asia Pacific, because it is such a disproportionate leader, I suppose, across the world when it comes to NTN and satellite connectivity.
Wonderful. Which user cases can provide much more growth in the market? We see emergency critical services, Internet of Things, coal, maritime, aviation, and other enterprise initiatives that are gaining commercial attention.
I mean, Internet of Things is clearly an opportunity for satellite. Remote location. I mean, if you think of those complex geographies I've talked about, having something remote be able to be monitored in real time, it can be a significant value. And I think that is definitely an opportunity for incremental growth. There is, of course, just from talking to enterprise, in our GSMA intelligence survey, the enterprises responded that equipment monitoring, supply chain efficiencies and asset tracking were top target use cases. And if you think about that, things moving through complex geographies or across the diverse Asia Pacific region, being able to track them through a single type of capability is a significant benefit. I think, the initial services that we're seeing available on NTN also add value for consumers, emergency SMS. Start seeing New Zealand where the capability of messaging and actually bandwidth to standard handsets is a significant opportunity. That technology will continue to grow as bandwidth and collaboration between telcos nationally with satellite operators increase the bandwidth. That will grow the potential opportunity for users. And I think also as those partnerships continue to grow with the huge maritime geographies and disaster resilience needs of Asia Pacific, there's also two strong use cases to come there.
Very good. Technology is taking us to automated networks. Asia now includes nations that will play a leading role in how it shall all play out. What's your thoughts on smart cities, connected car, and where all that's heading?
Across Asia Pacific, just about every nation has set out some pretty ambitious goals for smart cities and smart nations. ASEAN has become a hub for smart city innovation with the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy and their Smart Green ASEAN Cities program. Indonesia has got their 100 Smart Cities movement, which is around integrating AI across smart cities. And they're building that new capital, Nusantara, which is all about a connected city from the start. Singapore, of course, has a long history in being a very connected and leading edge city when it comes to using technology such as 5G to support smart infrastructure applications. And I think when it comes to satellites, that's going to be complementary to fulfilling those programs, while I think a large part of it will be fulfilled through terrestrial networks. In Barcelona this year, KDDI announced plans which are around deploying humanoid robots in stores, drones on top of stores for disaster response and a number of other things. That will form part of this seamless connectivity that allows services to operate in terrestrial networks and then also move to areas which require satellite connectivity. I think with the combination of AI to allow agents and services to seamlessly transfer and support people across those different connectivity environments, we will see a very exciting, I think, era of innovation in the area of smart cities, connected cars, connected devices come as we head towards the end of this decade. And with the dawn of 6G, it's going to become a very exciting period, I think, to bring that NTN together with terrestrial networks.
It really does look as though it's going to be something fascinating going to take place there. So policy and regulatory issues, what's your thought?
Well, you come to the really core of GSMA's origins there. And so, we issued a new policy paper in March recommending the development of adaptive and proportionate regulatory frameworks for direct-to-user LEO satellite services. I mean, the funny thing, what you see is the technology is moving very rapidly in this space, and countries don't update, or it's difficult to have regulation move at the same sort of speed as technology. And of course, across the Asia Pacific, you've got countries where regulation has clearly not kept pace, even with terrestrial technology. We're seeing the rapid innovation in LEO and direct-to-device services. The policy landscape remains quite fragmented. And actually, that's one of the reasons why we have the M360 ASEAN this year, is to help harmonize policy and regulation in areas such as NTN, so that we can create some more certainty for operators, investors, and governments as they look to integrate NTN into those digital nation visions. Of course, so far we're seeing different approaches leading to different outcomes. In Japan, regulators have taken a more proactive approach, enabling new models such as high-altitude platforms alongside commercial services like satellite to mobile roaming. And that shows how aligned, forward-looking regulation can directly support innovation and help close real coverage gaps, particularly in challenging terrain. At the same time, across much of Asia Pacific, frameworks are more fragmented, particularly in markets with complex geographies such as Indonesia and the Philippines, where operators are going through different licensing approaches and spectrum considerations. And that is really increasing the cost and complexity of scaling satellite services across borders, and it slows down deployments. And even just with the renewal of spectrum licenses for terrestrial services, such as what you're seeing happening in Australia, all add, some complexity and, let's say, hurdles for this convergence of satellite and mobile to move ahead seamlessly. From a GSMA point of view, the priorities are pretty straightforward. First is regulatory parity. If satellite and mobile providers are delivering similar services, they should operate under comparable rules. And that's essential for fair competition and consistent consumer protection. Second is around harmonization. Satellite services are inherently cross-border, so better alignment on spectrum coordination, coexistence, and regulatory processes are really critical to enable NTN and direct-to-device to scale. Third, and this is not unique to NTN, but predictability. Operators, investors need clear, stable rules to commit to capital at scale. And satellites historically have very long business cases, maybe even longer than terrestrial networks. And so certainty is really a key criteria to see faster progress. And alongside this, promoting strong partnerships between mobile and satellite operators will be critical. For direct-to-device services in particular, especially where IMT spectrum is involved, collaboration between mobile operators and satellite operators is the most effective model. And it's about ensuring efficient use of spectrum, supporting integration with existing networks, and avoiding fragmented standalone deployments. I think that will ultimately deliver the best outcomes for users and support sustainable long-term investment. From a GSMA point of view, policymakers really should be clear on what satellite and NTN can and cannot do. There's often some confusion that satellite is about closing the usage gap. More than 95% of people in Asia Pacific are covered by terrestrial networks. Closing that coverage gap and supporting use cases in a complementary manner. 50% of the people who are covered by terrestrial networks who are not using mobile networks at the moment, actually the usage gap is not about coverage. It's about affordability, digital skills, and trust. Now, satellite can extend coverage and improve resilience, but it's not itself about driving adoption. And that's why it's important that we continue to work with regulators and policymakers to understand that it's about complementary technology, commercial partnerships, and harmonization of spectrum and regulation to help build a inclusive connectivity ecosystem rather than competing ecosystems. And so the priority should be really about integrating NTN into existing mobile networks plans, and in parallel addressing the underlying barriers to usage. And that's really when it comes back to that I mentioned at the beginning about the vision, about creating a very sustainable region of digital nations where nations can solve that complex algorithm of technology, because depending on your geographies and your state of the market, maturity of the technology, the solution for Indonesia is probably very different to, say, the solution for a small island nation in the Pacific on how you connect people meaningfully so they can all participate in a safe and secure digital economy.
Any other takeaways you'd like to leave with us, Julian?
Well, I'd say it's a great. I mean, as I mentioned before, I think the period we go in the next couple of years towards the end of the decade is going to be an exciting period for innovation. If we can get this regulation and policy harmonization working, especially in areas like across ASEAN, it will create a real, let's say, global lighthouse for the world to see. EU has a history of being, a united sort of geography, but that they have terrestrial, largely as a solution. ASEAN and Asia Pacific is a very diverse region, say, with complex geographies. Unfortunately, leaders in, disaster impacts, and the opportunity for terrestrial mobile technology to work with NTN as we head towards the 6G era will be an exciting place to be. I think GSMA welcomes being part of that ecosystem and helping advance how we can use this technology to really create those sustainable digital nations for everyone to participate in.
Julian, thank you for coming along today and sharing your GSMA and your thoughts on where the NTN 5G and indeed 6G is all heading. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It was great to be part of this.